Hi everyone. Due to popular demand, I put together a short review video that hopefully will help you a little bit for the upcoming midterm. So this video is on the call perfect verb and covers the three verbal patterns that we're working on, which are call, PL, and hifil. So just once again, looking to see where we are in the verbal system, we're working on the perfect verb form and some of the most common occurrences of that particular verbal pattern. So we're working on perfect verbs. And recall once again that call, PL, and hifil are the most common of the verbs. So that's why we're starting there. And also within call, it's important to remember that the third masculine singular, our third masculine plural, or actually common plural, and first common singular and second masculine singular are the most common forms. So if you're not all that familiar with the feminine forms, don't let that bother you because they just don't show up that often. So if you have to prioritize your work, concentrate on the masculine and common forms. So the form of all perfect verbs basically follows root and then suffix. So all perfect verbs indicate person, number, and gender through the use of suffixes. And all verbal patterns use the same suffixes. So if you learn the suffixes and get to be really good at identifying what pronouns they go with, the faster your reading will go and the easier Hebrew will be for you. So sometimes the perfect form is also called the suffixed form because the suffix is where we get the information about person, number, and gender. So what are the suffixes in particular? So I've used the root shin mem ayin for this illustration, and this root means to hear or to hear and to pay attention to in some sense. So these are the root letters, and in the third masculine singular form there is no suffix, and this is the most common form. So third masculine singular, he or it, with no suffix. The third feminine singular form, she or it, has a suffix that's kametz he. So you begin with the three root letters and you add kametz he on the end, and you had the feminine form. So hopefully that ending should look very feminine to you by now, because this is also a very common ending for feminine nouns and for other places to demonstrate feminine features in the language. So that should be logical, perhaps, to you. So it's pronounced sham-ah versus shama in the third masculine singular form. So shama, sham-ah. The third common plural that they form is sham-u, and that u ending also shows up in the imperfect form that we're going to be studying very shortly. So think of this u ending as a marker of plurality, because as I said, it will show up again. Then we have shamata, and this is the second person masculine singular, the you masculine form. So this you singular form. And so the ending here is just ta, so root plus ta. And the second person feminine singular form, you feminine, which of course is less common in the Bible, is shamat. And so it's just a t sound instead of a ta sound at the end. Second person masculine plural, the y'all form is shamatem, and the tem ending is a marker of y'all, as I mentioned. And The feminine form of this, which is very rare in the Bible, I think there's only 7 occurrences of it in the perfect, would be, even though we don't have it for this particular root, would be Shema 10. So the difference between Tem and 10. And remember that if you're referring to a group of people and there happens to be one male in the group, then you use the masculine form. So the 10 ending is only for a group that is all feminine. And the first person common singular, the I form, I heard, is shamati. And finally, we have the first person common plural form, the we form, which is shamanu. So remember that oo ending, once again showing plurality. So it's we instead of I, if that's helpful for you. So again, all it is are 3 root letters plus a suffix. And the suffix is the same for every perfect verb, no matter what the vowel pattern. So if you get really good memorizing these suffixes, it's really going to help you in your reading. So let's do a little bit of comparison of the forms so we get a sense of the differences between call, PL, and hifil, and maybe more pointedly how to recognize those differences. So I'm going to use the first person common singular form to do this comparison. We could have used other forms, but I think this is a fairly easy one to work with. So these are all going to be I forms. So the word I heard is shamati, so call first person common singular. And we don't have this root in the PL, but so I used a different root, but also for the common singular form, debarti. So look at the differences between these two. The first difference is that the Hirik vowel in the PL form, so the single dot, as opposed to the comments or the T-shaped vowel in the call. And otherwise, the words look the same, except the middle root letter in the PL has a dagesh, and that is one of the features of the PL. So if that middle root letter is not a guttural or a resh, and can be doubled using a dagesh, it will be doubled. So those, if you're looking at these two forms, and if you were trying to tell which one was call and which one was PL, that's how you would tell the difference. Now let's look at the hifil. The hifil adds a hi to the beginning of all the perfect verb forms. And then I've picked a root that shows up in hifil, pe, kof, dalet. And so if we have that root in the hifil form, it's hifkadti. And you'll notice that once again under the first root letter, instead of a kametz or a hirik, we have just a schwa. Maybe that doesn't particularly stand out to you, but the hi before the 3 root letters should stand out, and that is the marker of the hifil. So let's look at some of the stranger forms, the more problematic forms in each of the 3 types. So let's look what happens in the perfect with a third hey verb. So I've chosen here the very common root ayin sin hey, which means to make or do. And you'll notice that the third hey has dropped away, and in this case, in the perfect, it's been replaced by a yod. So the hey is gone, but replaced by a yod, and there's a hirik vowel under the second root letter, which remains. So it's asiti. Now here's a PL that's also a third hey, so it's sade bav hey, which means to command. And you'll notice that the exact same thing has happened with the hey in this particular morphology. So we have CVT. And again, the middle root letter is doubled like we would expect in PL, so it has a dagesh. And the the vowel under the first root letter is a heroic once again. So instead of an ah, we get an I. But the exact same thing has happened with third hey. So this is how third hey verbs look the vast majority of the time in most perfect forms. And then here's a hifil from a third hey, so gimel, lamed, hey. And we have the he at the beginning, a schwa under the first root letter, and then instead of a hirik and a yod, we have a tsere and a yod. But if you see a yod in third position, that's a very strong clue of third hey, because yods can never be in third position in the root letter combination. So you know right away that something is going on, and you have to figure out what that is. But guessing third hey is a very good guess. Now let's look and see what happens if the middle root letter is a vav or a yod. And remember, the roots that have vav or yod in the middle often behave in similar ways, so that's why they're kind of grouped together. So the first root I'm looking at here is kof, vav, mem, which means to stand or rise, rise up. And the form for the first person common singular here is kamti. So the middle vav has completely dropped away in this form. And you may remember that in call participles, the exact same thing happens, that the middle vav drops out. So we end up with kamti. Now in the PL, the middle vav is retained. So we have from the root ayin vav resh, and you have to kind of scrape to find roots in the PL with that are middle vav, but here there does happen to be at least one. And in this case, as I said, the vav does not drop out. We have iverti. So it's retained because you have to have something in the middle to double. And so the middle root letter is doubled as you would expect in the PL. There's a dagesh, so doesn't drop out in the PL. And then the hifil, the middle vav, if there's a vav, or I guess if there's a yod, it's retained, but you end up from the same root, kof vav mem that we used in call, you have hakimoti, which is kind of wild. You get that O vowel there at the end. And you'll notice instead of he, we get a ha. And instead of a vav, there's a hirik yod in the middle. So that is a little tricky. And as I mentioned in class, the hifil perfect probably have the most, I don't know, anomalies, I guess, if you will, and one of the tougher parts of the language to kind of really understand what's going on. And then let's look at first yod. So very easy in call, yadati. So there's nothing interfering with the front of the word there. So the yod is retained just like we might expect. So yod, dalet, ayin is just simply yadati. That should look very regular and normal to you. In PL, from the same root, very rare, but it does exist, you get yidati. So let's look at the differences between these two forms again. You have a hirik vowel in the PL where you have a comments in the call. That's a big difference. And once again, you have a doubled middle root letter. In this case, it's the dalet, which gets a dagesh in the PL, but doesn't have one in the call. So that's how you would tell the difference between the two. And then hifil is a bit strange. So instead of hi, you get ho. So it's hodati. So in this case, the initial yod has turned into a vav, if you want to think of it that way, or the hey has taken on an o vowel instead of a hirik vowel. So if you see something like ho or hey at the beginning of a word, chances are there is a root letter at the beginning that has dropped out. So in the other forms in the call and the PL, you have nothing going on at the beginning of the word, you might say, to interfere with anything with the yod. So therefore, it just stays the way it is. But in the hifil, not only do you have activity going on at the end of the root, but you have something there at the beginning of the root, and that affects weak letters. So if you have weak letters at the beginning, then things are going to shift and change in slightly unusual ways. So once again, yadati and yidati and hodati. Sorry, that was repeated there. Let's look at first nun just for kicks. So, given you the root nun tav nun, so it not only has a first root, but a first nun, but a third nun. And you'll notice that when the third nun came into contact with the T suffix, we have natati. So the second nun from nun tav nun has dropped out in this case because it couldn't withstand the addition of the suffix, so it's gone. So it's not natanti, it's natati. So the nun is gone. And just to show you what a PL root that begins with a nun looks like, I chose nibati. So here we have a Hirik vowel under the first root letter and a dagesh in the second root letter, just like we would expect in PL. But what happens from the same root, nun beit tav, when it's produced in hifil? So in hifil you have that hi beginning, so therefore the hi sort of knocks out the nun, overcomes it, it drops out of the language. So instead of hinbati, we just have hibati. And here the first nun has completely dropped away. So that's what we would expect to see. Anyway, these are some of the common differences between call PL and hifil. I think it would do you well to get really familiar with the suffixes, especially the most common ones, and just to understand the basic difference between call, PL, and hifil in general, and be somewhat familiar with the various things that can happen when you have weak letters. So, hope that helped, and thanks. Good luck studying. Talk to you soon.